It's Wednesday, it's hump day, and we're going to get our predictions on the record a little bit early this week, Carlos, because it's December, and, well, we got a lot going on, right?
Absolutely.
Absolutely. So, look, Lions coming off another loss, 5 straight. I think we've talked about that enough. Now, 5 straight, 8 of 9. Not a good stretch here for the Lions, and
Last quarter, Dave. Last quarter.
Final
quarter.
But before we get to the last quarter, that not good stretch has led to a couple former Lions speaking out against this team a little bit. Just, we saw Jace Billingsley drop a picture of Bob Quinn and Rod Wood in a video, which I didn't, completely understand. We saw Glover Quinn today just say that he doesn't think the Lions have it in them, have a rebound in them because, maybe they don't like Patricia's methods, I guess. So I don't know. Some of this comes with the territory, right? When you're losing and things aren't going well, and it looks like, there's some questions about job security. That's when people, tend to come out of the woodwork and shots start to be taken. But I don't know how much credence do you give some of this stuff? Glover played for this team last year. Obviously, he was around the team a little bit and came out to visit them during training camp at least. It just seems one after another. Some of these little things are starting to pile up now.
Like you said, I think it's kind of opportunistic. It's, when the team's not playing well, there's a little sour grapes here from Jace and maybe from Glover too. I don't sense it. I don't sense that the team is quitting, that it's taking plays off, that guys aren't playing hard enough. I think maybe some guys are being smart about injuries and not, going full bore, let me go out there and hurt my groin even more. Who knows what, right? But I
Always
don't.
got to go with groin, huh?
Yeah, I don't see it though. I don't really see that this team is like quitting and not trying as hard, and they don't have it in them. And we talked a little bit about this off camera, and I think one of the things with this team I feel like, and Trey Flowers is kind of an example of this, is one of these guys who just is all about football. He's always grinding, always working, always practicing, always, doing as much as he can. The question is, do you have enough of those passionate leaders to step up and say, this matters too much to us? We're playing for jobs. You guys got to leave it all out there. You got to worry about your film for your next job next year, all that. I don't sense that there's that kind of passion in the locker room for somebody, the Drew Brees-like kind of guys, to step up and say, we can't have this. That's the only thing that kind of worries me. Maybe that's kind of in line with what Glover's saying, that these guys don't have that rah-rah, we're going to push through this. They're going through their paces, doing their work. I don't sense that they're not trying.
Let me read. I'm going to read Glover's comments here, just for those who
That
didn't
was-
see it.
where
This
was
was
it
on
today?
Pat McAfee's show, a little podcast that the former NFL punter does. Glover was making the media rounds, apparently. And he said, right now they're struggling. They're struggling, and it's not a great situation. And it's not a situation where, like, I don't know if they can fight out of it right now, because I don't know if the love and the like for Patricia's style makes the players want to fight out of it. I think they're to the point where they're like, man, we're 3-8-1. It's cold out here. Like, we've got 4 games left. Like, let's just get this thing over with. And I think that, look, that frankly, it happens a lot, right? In life, in business, in football, and whatever. You get to the end of the season, the school year. Some of those you start to see. We used to call them I-75 eyes, right? Back when players would drive out of town after the season, and in fact, we saw it a little bit on Monday. I saw a lot of players carrying boxes. It just kind of struck me. I don't know if they were packing up, but it seemed a little early for some of that, and I think that's. I don't know. I think Glover's point, he was part of this last year when it was really tough to get some buy-in for Matt Patricia. The locker room did not buy in wholly to what Matt was selling. And we've talked about this plenty of times on here. They went out and they turned over a bunch of the locker room. It's, 50% of the locker room right now. And a lot of the guys they brought in, you mentioned Trey Flowers, Danny Amendola, these guys that, they're not going to give less than maximum effort, and it doesn't matter who's coaching them, Matt Patricia or somebody else, but they certainly have that relationship with Matt Patricia. So, I think there's, certainly there are still guys in the locker room that maybe aren't buying wholly into things, and maybe some of those guys are in the defensive back room that Glover was a part of.
Who could you be talking
No,
about?
I'm not talking about anybody in
That's an
particular.
example, sure,
I'm
theoretically.
in theory. I'm just saying that, so I think there's I wouldn't discount what Glover's saying. I mean, he was part of this, and I think there's Matt Patricia's style is not for everyone. But I think you're right, Carlos, that what we've seen here the last couple weeks, it's not like the Lions are laying down and giving no effort. They're overmatched. They don't have a quarterback right now. Their defense still hasn't been playing very good, and that's no offense to David Blau. I just mean they don't have Matthew Stafford. They don't have that offense as a whole, and their defense has not been good all year. So I don't. They don't have a lot of weapons they don't have a lot of bullets in the chamber right now to fight with.
Yeah, and that's the thing. You look back at these games, and they've been very close. They were 3 minutes away from beating the Bears on Thanksgiving. They lost late at Washington. They've been close, and I think from my perspective is I just don't think either the talent is there, the scheme is there, the coaching is there defensively. I think there's other things. I don't think it's the players. I don't think that you could look at this team. I don't think this is after the season. I don't think if Matt Patricia's still here and Bob Quinn are still here. I don't think they're going to look back and say we didn't have the right players. There's always roster churn, but I don't think they would say that locker room, the culture was wrong. It didn't have the let's fight through this kind of thing. I think, like you said, the 50% turnover. He pretty much has the locker room he wants. There's always going to be tweaks here and there, maybe in the defensive back room. That's you don't know. But I don't sense that. I don't think Glover's quite. I think Glover may be speaking to some of his buddies, who are still here, and maybe they kind of are giving him the idea that we don't love Patricia's style, and that's fair. That may be true with some of the players, but I think when you look at 53 guys, overall the majority, I think they're okay with who Patricia is this year.
Look, obviously, again, not everybody's going to like everybody in an NFL locker room, coaching staff, whatever,
media room,
except for us, we're beloved. But no, it really is like, again, I don't discount what Glover's saying at all, because I think, he saw a lot of things last year, and he was one of the leaders on this team last year. It has been a little bit different. I don't think it's not fighting, but, maybe it is. At the end of the day, like, I don't know. It's a tough thing to understand, because 4 games left, guys really are, you do at some point start looking out for the future, and you start looking out for yourself and for number one a little bit. And, I think it's fair to wonder if the Lions are in that situation right now. And that's why we say, hey, there's no sense in Matthew Stafford coming back, right? He has more important things down the road to play with. And the Lions brought Kerryon Johnson back to practice today. And now the same argument applies. Like, should the Lions even bother playing Kerryon Johnson if he can get back for the final game or two? So, there's a lot going on right now. And with a bad team, there's a lot of talk out there, a lot of noise. And I just think we're in for another, kind of a long month here as we sift through some of that noise and try to get to the end of the season and see what becomes of Matt Patricia in this organization.
Yeah, you said it. It's going to be kind of a death march at the end. Like who's playing for what? The coaches, the players, the administration. You're probably going to hear more of this kind of stuff. Some more guys coming out of the woodwork. Guys who aren't happy and willing to, and you know how it is. Once one person starts, another person likes that comment, and then they chime in and they say something on Twitter and they say, Instagram.
Well, Glover even said as the Lions tweeted out, Kerryon's returning to practice today. Glover tweeted it, or replied to it. Is on Instagram, not Twitter. Why? With the 3 or 4 question marks. So again. And he's entitled to his opinion, and I think a lot of people out there are wondering that same thing.
Well, okay, answer Glover right now. Should Kerryon Johnson? He can come back as early as the Denver game, second to last game, December 22nd.
I think Kerryon Johnson and Matthew Stafford are 2 different situations, 2 different players, right? Like Kerryon is. I don't know what his future is with this team. I'm not saying that he's gone. He's still the number 1 running back, but Bo Scarborough has played well in his absence. Kerryon has been hurt. This is 2 straight years now. He only has 2 years left on his contract. He's a running back, so it's not like you're trying to save him for his 30s, his late 30s or the next contract or whatever, like you may be doing with Stafford. So I think those are 2 different situations to me. If Kerryon can get back and play the last 2 games of the season, it doesn't bother me at all that they bring him back. Whereas if Stafford is going to be cleared for Week 17, that seems kind of pointless bringing him back. Where Kerryon is not, he's not Matthew Stafford. It's just the rules apply differently to different people in the NFL based on, your stature, what you contribute to the team. And Kerryon is not in that group of players like Matthew Stafford, who you're looking out for their, long term, what they can mean to this roster.
Yeah, I think this Patricia and Quinn, they need wins in a bad way, and it doesn't matter. I mean, I think you're right. I think that Stafford he kind of makes no sense. Although if you're looking at 5 straight losses and then you're whatever, if he can come back earlier,
Call it 6. They play the Vikings this week.
yeah. I mean, it's 6. It's mounting. Anything you can do to like stave that off. I mean, they do need that, and if Carrion can help them with that, I would even say right now, who knows what the negotiation has been, what the talks have been with ownership, with all that stuff, the brass, the ownership, all that. Are we shutting Stafford down but not putting him on IR, whatever, But if they realize they need wins, I mean, a win never hurts your case,
Absolutely
right?
not.
So especially if you can win at home, the last game against Green Bay, something like that, a little feel good at the end. I don't think it should matter at this point. I think if they win out, if they go 4-0 last season, it really doesn't matter. They're out of the playoffs. You're not going to make the playoffs. It's another disappointing season. I think that judgment needs to be made. You've seen what this team has done. It's been close. It hasn't been good enough. 2 straight years. You can make your decision there. You don't need Stafford to come back for the last 2 games and win 2 essentially meaningless games. But someone like Carrion, I would put him in the same boat. He's had one knee injury last year, another knee injury this year. Do you want him to get hurt, have a concussion or a back issue?
You'd put him in the same boat of not playing him, not bringing
him, because then you want him to deal with something else going into the offseason that delays his readiness for the offseason program and everything else.
My thing is, what role is he going to play in this team next year? We don't know. He can't stay healthy.
Ostensibly, he's the starting running back.
To me, it's like he's in the Rashawn Melvin camp, right? Rashawn Melvin missed the last couple of games with a rib injury, so why would you shut Rashawn Melvin down? I mean,
because he's Rashawn Melvin, and
it's just the same thing applies to Carrion. Carrion does not have that stature yet.
He's a second-round pick. I mean, there's an investment in him. We've seen promise in him. It's just, yes, you're right. Absolutely, he hasn't been able to stay healthy. So, but you never know. Maybe the third Stafford, right? First couple of years of his career too, he had trouble with injuries and stuff. So, different position, but Carrion. No reason to risk him out there for what? Oh, he ran well against whatever, the Packers. He had 72 yards. Wow. How is that going to change? Let him just, practice with the team is fine. Get back more involved in the game planning and everything else, the study, the film. Have him whatever. And then next year, just have him come at the offseason full speed, ready to go. We don't need, how it is in the offseason. Guys are like, oh, something's going on. Oh, they're recovering from something else, and it's a little slow, and they're back slow to camp, and this and that. Just have them come fully healthy into the offseason program.
Yeah, no, I mean, I can certainly understand your opinion.
I'm right. Just say I'm right.
Very rarely are you right.
So you want to see him back?
I mean, if he's healthy enough to come back and, practice goes well, bring him back. It doesn't matter. I mean, look, Bo Scarborough right now is your starting running back to me. I would, Carrion's going to get 10 carries if he comes back.
You ask Patricia herself, could they complement each other? And he's like, yeah, they might, I mean, different things teams have to, prepare for 2 different styles.
I think, as you look ahead to next year, that maybe you have a nice little 1-2 punch in the backfield with Carrion and Scarborough. I think Bo has done enough here these last couple of weeks that you can at least dream on it and say, all right, the Lions got they got the makings of a nice little running game here. And again, Carrion would be part of that. I agree with you. I think Carrion is their best overall running back. I just don't think, what's he played? 12 games, 16 games in his career. I don't know exactly what the number is at this point, but I don't think he's played enough to where he's to the point where he doesn't need that work. We don't know what his exact role is going to be. We don't even know if he's going to be the starter going forward. I would think that would be an open sort of competition. Again, in my opinion, he'd be the best back, but we don't know. Maybe that's Bo Scarborough's job. Maybe that's how they want to run it. So it's just, look, Bo's ran well, and at the risk of reading too much into what he's done so far, I think that's a competition, right? I think Bo has played well enough, and he fits the style that they want to have, that it's you can at least entertain the thought that, hey, maybe Bo Scarborough and Carrion Johnson together give you a pretty good backfield, and who knows who's the one, who's the two.
Well, I think like they talked about earlier this year, this is what they were doing, was going with the hotter hand. Whoever who's running well, running better, whatever, game to game. Which is really the way they should handle it. That makes a lot of sense to me.
Yep.
So those two guys, 1-2 punch, J.D. McKissick, I mean, I don't know if he's under contract for next year, but
He's a free agent.
Free agent. I mean, that's another interesting guy. Your scat back type guy, whatever. Ty Johnson too, and they have promise there. I mean, that run game has been fairly respectable. They're ranked 18th in yards per game, and that's people wouldn't think that kind of middle of the pack, but when you consider how poor the results have been, they've still managed to run the ball, even missing their starting running back for a long time.
All right. So before we get on to the prediction in the game this weekend, Minnesota Vikings Sunday in Minnesota. I want to get back to one thing that you said. You mentioned Martha Ford earlier, and who knows what those conversations are like with her and Matt and Stafford and everything that's going on right now. All those conversations. So how much do you think, just sort of tying in what we started the day by talking about, those comments by a Jace Billingsley, by a Glover Quinn, how much do you think that factors into ownership's decision, the front office's decision when it comes to the future of this regime? I mean, is that something that when those little things stack up, whether it's a player like Jace Billingsley, who was a very bit player here for the 2 seasons he was here, or Glover Quinn, who was a much more important player for 6 seasons, I don't know how much should those weigh into the equation when Martha Ford, Rod Wood, whoever sits down to figure out the direction of this organization at the end of the year?
Not at all, I don't think. I mean, like you said, Jace, if it was a star player, it would be different. But
does Glover count as a star player? I mean, he was their best, or one of their best defensive players for half a decade almost.
Jace does not count. Sorry, Jace. Glover doesn't really count because he's not here. He's talking about the locker room right now, and he hasn't been here this year. Last year, if he had said it last year at the end of the season or toward whatever, you could have said, well, okay, he was in that locker room, he knew all the players. And I'm sure he has some idea of some of the players, but I don't think how it is. I mean,
he very well may talk. I mean, look, when we saw him in Texas and he came out to that Houston Texans practice, I mean, guys came off the field and running up to him, giving him hugs. And
right.
I think Quandre Diggs was one of them who was not here. And Slay, I mean, there were some guys that certainly respect him. So just being, 9 months removed, I don't know if that means he doesn't have a pulse on what's going on here. But, again, we also have to take into account that, he was part of what was going on last year. And things have changed since last year.
I think that when we talk to players a lot about, the future and stuff and decisions and all that, they always say, I mean, whether it's been this regime or previous regimes, they say, those guys upstairs don't ever ask us, what they want to do, whatever. So at least with the Lions under the Ford family control, whether it's been Matt Millen or Martin Mayhew or whoever it is, Schwartz and and all these guys, right? They don't really consult the players. There's too many guys, too many opinions, too much social media to keep track of. I don't think Martha, more accurately, Sheila Ford and Steve Ham, I don't think they're really tracking what these guys are saying. And even we talked about it a little bit. It was kind of hard to decipher where Jace was coming from. Glover's comments really weren't that damning, I don't think, I don't know if they have the heart. You don't know because you're not here. That's one of the reasons.
Well, he's saying because they don't believe in Patricia's methods, essentially.
Yeah.
But they're,
it'd be one thing if he backed it up with, I just talked to several players, recently, and they've said this to me. It's just his opinion. He just thinks, which was probably true last year, but so I don't think there's much weight behind that. I don't think they're sitting there at the end of the day like, well, who said what? Oh, Glover said this on Pat McAfee's show. Oh, no. Their decision is going to be based on the results.
Yeah.
How Patricia has laid out and Bob Quinn have laid out the blueprint for what they wanted to do. How close or far they've come from that.
Yep.
And how much really trust. I think in any employment situation is how much do I trust you? You may not give me the results now, but do I trust what you're saying? Is there some idea that like, yeah, what you're saying makes sense and the excuses you're giving me make sense? I can buy that. We'll keep going for this, or no, let's tear it all down.
I think you hit on all of the major points of what they should consider, except for one, or that maybe not what they should consider, but what will factor into the equation. It's not like on their whiteboard, right? They're writing, all right, Jace Billingsley, what he said in the negative, and Glover Quinn, what he said in the negative. But the one thing that you left out, Carlos, was public perception, and in a business and the apathy among the fan base and some of those things right now. I think that's the one thing that would worry me about. If I was in this regime, because there's a lot of, public sentiment has turned against this regime in a lot of ways,
Sure.
and I think a lot of that is due to what's happened on the field with the 5 straight losses and 8 of 9. Certainly, some of it is still a carryover from last year. You never get a second chance to make a first impression, obviously. So I think it all, it sort of got off to a negative start, and it's continued that way in a lot of regards. And I think those little things. The comments by a Glover Quinn, I think that just factors that feeds some of that negative public perception, and too much of that, it's not good for business, and it's tough for, and I know you've said this before, right? Ownership, they're a lot more insulated from some of that than we are, and when we're in the midst of it and reporting on it and talking to the people that make those comments. But I do think when those little things start to pile up, that public perception is. The scale is so weighted against them that is one of those factors at the end of the day.
And let's not forget, though, while we're in the moment here with Patricia and all this stuff, people were negative about Jim Caldwell too, and he was 9-7 and made the playoffs, and there's always going to be,
well, but it wasn't just Jim Caldwell. And 18 games in, or 24 games into Martha's tenure as sole owner, as majority owner, primary owner, she fired Martin Mayhew and Tom Lawan. So public perception was they were 1-7, and that's a lot of I think the reason why she acted when she did. Embarrassing loss on the road in London, came back, just couldn't put up with it anymore. Public perception at that time was like, get rid of everybody. It doesn't make any sense. They lucked into making the playoffs last year. They were bad under Schwartz. They're bad now.
And Sheila and Steve Hamp wanted this to happen, and Rod Wood was their hand-picked president, and they wanted to take over, and Bill Ford was pushed aside. This is a whole political Game of Thrones situation. It wasn't just they had a 1-7 start and it was embarrassing. There was an external force pushing this to happen. It wasn't just, these guys have had it, whatever. It was like Rod Wood was around the team before that, even before he was
certainly president. Yes. For those who don't know, Tom Lawan was more of a Bill Ford Jr. guy, I guess, and Rod Wood was, aligned.
I guess, yes, it was.
Yeah, well, but it wasn't. Tom Lawan came of power when William Clayford was still there,
right.
But he was associated with Bill Ford Jr., I guess, and Rod Wood was associated with Sheila and Martha Ford. So that's what Carlos means when he's saying the different factions of power, I guess.
Yeah, it wasn't just that we're getting rid of this guy because he's not doing a good job mid-season. It was a power struggle within the family of who gets to sort of take the reins. And during the end of Bill Ford or William Clay Ford's tenure, and he was in his 90s, he was in failing health. Bill Jr. was really in charge of this team.
Sure.
He sat on a lot of high committees, the broadcast committee and everything, powerful committees. He'd been involved in the NFL for a long time. And now it was Sheila's turn really to do this. Whether that's right or wrong, who knows? But so that was part of that whole regime change. It goes beyond Martha Ford just being mad and firing people. There was something more to it. So that's the whole thing with this regime now is Rod Wood is Sheila and Steve Hamp's hand-picked team president. They're probably going to run they're very likely going to run the team after Martha Ford's time is over. So are you going to fire their first general manager and coach and start over? Is Rod Wood, who's Rod Wood? Riverboat Ron's out there. I don't know. I mean, what's the next step? They have to, if they're going to fire Patricia and Quinn, they better have a really good plan in place already for the next step. So like you said, public perception right now, yes, it's negative and everything, but they're insulated from it. Do they really want to start the whole thing over? Are they going to buy the excuses that Quinn and Patricia are going to give them? That's a whole nother. But you know what? There's no guarantee, right? It doesn't matter who you hire. I mean, it doesn't. There's nobody has the answer, even as much as they're going to tell you. I'm the next Sean McVay. I'm the next whatever. There's no guarantee.
I just wanted to read you one other quote here because what you said, it just kind of, we've talked about this before. We've argued about this before a little bit. And look, I think it goes for everything, right? Where there's a, it's why Bob Quinn hired Matt Patricia. That was his guy to begin with, right? Just like, Rod Wood was, Martha Ford's guy, or Tom Lawan was Bill Jr.'s guy, whatever. So everybody has these associations and these alignments, and often that gets in the way of running good business or putting the right people in charge. But that's life, that's the world. But since we've talked about this before, this was a quote from David Tepper, Carolina Panthers owner, after he fired Ron Rivera yesterday, and just talking about why Jonathan Jones, Monday morning quarterback, said he asked Tepper what he's learned from the times in his career he's made bad hires that will help him hire the right people this time around. And he said, get the best people in, put them in the best position to be successful, and when you don't think you can be, fix it. And that's what we've talked about a little bit when it comes down to sort of what you were saying was, well, are you going to get rid of your first hire? Like there's being scared of doing that. I mean, not to get into the argument that we had with our 25-minute video last week or whatever, but David Tepper, very successful Wall Street guy, now owns the Carolina Panthers.
That's
what it is.
Who else said that?
Me,
when
basically.
They were first hired.
No, but I mean, I think that's what it is. That's what it is, right?
Rod Wood is scribbling this down.
No,
right now. Like, wait a minute,
the point being that you pick people because you know what, you think these people have the right thing to be successful, whatever it is, right? The right acumen, the right football sense, the right whatever. Those people are going to be successful. Let me give them all the resources they need to be successful. When you realize that they're not going to be or can't be or won't be successful, you pull the plug on it. That's what David Tepper said, and I think that's what the point of what he was saying with the Carolina Panther search. And to your point about, well, will they be scared to make a move because this is their handpicked GM, their handpicked coach? I don't think that's what I'm saying. I don't think that factors in as much as you do that, oh my God, this was my guy, I can't move on from him. I think it's a case of if I still believe in him at the end of the day, and that's why I've said, wait till the end of the year and the decision comes down to, do I believe that, this, whoever it is, they can win, they can be successful in the NFL, win Super Bowls, win NFC championships, win playoff games, whatever, on a long-term basis. And if the answer is yes, you keep them. If the answer is no, you don't. You just have to, bottom line of it, that's the question that Martha Ford has to ask at the end of the day. And whatever her answer is, that's, the decision is made.
And here, let me ask you a question about this, and what Tepper is saying a little bit is, when Rod Wood got hired, he said, I'm not a football guy, with the air quotes, but I know how to hire the right people. That's what I've always done in business, is I hire the right people. Well, he didn't. If they fire Quinn and Patricia, obviously he didn't hire the right people. So then what gives you confidence that he's going to make the next hire? When basically this was based on one idea and one idea only, let's do New England. And now what?
Well, I would say two things to that. First,
you're not a football guy.
Right. First, maybe you realize that you don't need to lean on Ernie Accorsi or whoever to do your hiring. There's some plausible deniability or whatever, right? That, okay, I turned this search over to these people, and this is the direction that they led me down. Two, maybe I'm now, it's not like he's going to be involved in the picking of the talent side of things, but maybe now has better contacts around the league to make some of those other decisions himself. But beyond that, look, just because you make one bad hire, and I'm not saying that Rod is saying this about the people in place, that he considers that to be a bad hire. But I'm just saying in general, just because you make one bad hire, that doesn't mean that you'll make a second bad hire. I mean, I think you have been successful in those hires in the past, and there's reason to believe you can again. Look, the Matt Millen hire, right? Everyone can agree that was a terrible hire. But you know what? I think Bill Ford Jr., when the hire was made, he was thinking outside the box. He was trying to do something different. Right. Same thing like when he brought Alan Mulally to Ford, right? I don't know everything about business, but he thought outside the box a little bit, right? He didn't get a car guy. So in football, he didn't get a standard GM. They went and got Matt Millen. And then he wanted to pull the plug right away when he realized that wasn't working. Or I don't know about right away, but earlier than, the move was made. And they didn't. William Clay Ford, didn't want to make that move right away. And maybe there were some other factors. Joey Harrington, if that wasn't Matt's pick, and they sort of gave him a little more leeway for that. I mean, again, there's lots of factors that go into it. But again, I think just because you make one bad hire doesn't mean that you're going to make a second. You just have to, when you realize that a mistake has been made, you have to correct it. The worst thing you can do is let that mistake fester. And so, again, at the end of the season, that's just the question that Martha has to ask is, Are we, do I still have confidence, full confidence in these people to take me to where I want to be? And if the answer is yes, she keeps him. If the answer is no, we move on.
Do you think that? I mean, when Bob Quinn said, that 9-7 was on him, and that it's not good enough, and they want to be a championship contender, whatever. Do you think they've taken a step back from that, or are they? Is there any way to think that they're closer to that?
Well,
we see teams rise in the NFL out of nowhere every year. I mean, is this?
See, that's tough because ultimately, what do you have to judge on besides the record, right? And 3-8-1, you're nowhere close to it. But I agree with what you said early on, and we've talked about this before. Is that I think, on an individual basis, I think there is some talent here, and that's why this is so maddening to be 3-8-1. Because if you look at the parts on defense, they shouldn't be this bad on defense. Darius Slay hasn't always played great, but he's a 2-time Pro Bowl cornerback. Trey Flowers, he didn't get a lot of sacks early in the year, but he's been a pretty good player overall. Damon Harrison, a lot better player than what he showed right now. In terms of making these impact plays and being a big-time run stopper. So I think, there are some better pieces than what this defense has been as a whole. And, we've seen the offense take a little bit of a step forward this year. So, again, at the end of the day, you are what your record says you are. So are they closer? No. You can't say that in any way, shape, or form. Record-wise. But that's why it's tough. That's why this thing is so. That's why there's so many questions about Matt Patricia as a coach. Because if the pieces are in place, if we think that some of the pieces are in place to be better than 3-8-1, then who else is there to blame? And you guys know me by now, right? I'm not an excuse injury guy. Certainly there's valid reasons why the offense has taken a little bit of a step back under Matthew Stafford, but it's not like they were kicking butt before Matthew Stafford was hurt. From an overall team record perspective, they still had a losing record. So, again, that's why some of these questions come in, that if the pieces are better, and if before we thought we were better than a 9-7 team, well, then why are we a 3-8-1 team now? And so that's why a lot of this has been turned on Matt Patricia and saying, what's going on? How much of the blame do you deserve for where this team is record-wise?
I think that, you say you and that's the whole thing, say you are what your record says you are. But if let's just say they don't finish 6-10, they finish whatever with 5 wins this year. They finish
or 4 or 3.
Or 4 or 3. If they finish with a worse record than they did last year, do you believe this year's team was worse than last year's team?
No, not at all.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So you aren't necessarily what your record says you are, because you can point to stuff like if they'd had Stafford, they probably would have won the last couple of games.
But you can't say that. If they have Stafford, you would have thought they would have beat Arizona, and they didn't. They had Stafford. So that's that's part of it. That just because you have some of those guys, look, games are played differently on both sides of the field in that regard. So, I'd like to think they beat Washington
better than David Bell.
Absolutely, I'd like to think they beat Washington if Stafford is on the field. But they didn't beat Arizona when Stafford was on the field, and Arizona is 3-8-1, just like the Lions. So. I don't think you can just make those assumptions and say, with Stafford right now we're a 6-6 team.
Well, I think what you do is and this is definitely what Bob Quinn and Matt Patricia will have to do, is say, listen, look at Stafford. He was playing at an MVP level. Look at what Darrell Bevel has done. We brought him in, and he's re-energized the offense, and it was playing really well. Still has been playing pretty well, but even with Stafford, even better. Defensively, like you said. We have the pieces. We shouldn't be this bad. We need to add maybe a linebacker or whatever. They get little pieces they have.
Yep.
Look at the close games. Look at there's no division in the locker room. People aren't angry. They're not for the most part spouting off. Maybe one player. So there's the media. We have a better relationship with the media. Matt Patricia's not out there fighting with slouching guys and whatever. There's not the embarrassment. That's the kind of that's the kind of stuff. That's the kind of stuff that ownership is aware of, is these explosive moments of they're viral, to go across the whole league. And then, owners or whatever call other owners and what is going on over there? I don't know. And then there has to be an explanation. And that's, everybody's got a boss, even Matt Patricia, even Bob Quinn. And when things like that happen, it's a black guy in the organization. They've got to explain what happened. There's some damage control to be done. We haven't had those moments this year. So I think it's been a more calm, sedate. We have a plan. we're getting closer to that planned movement. Whether that's enough or not is a whole different question for Sheila / Martha / Steve Ham. So we don't know, but I don't think that you are who your record says you are. I think it's a little bit more than that this year.
Well, we've got 3 weeks left to discuss all of those dynamics, I guess. So, another long video today. Another long one coming next week, I'm sure. Yeah, I know. It has been a long time. I know. You miss us there on Freep.com, Facebook Live. But all right, so let's end it with this game this weekend. Minnesota Vikings again. I think a lot of people have sort of tuned out the game sort of stuff by this time. It doesn't matter if they win. In a lot of people's eyes, probably a lot of people won't even be watching the game just because that's sort of the state of Detroit sports right now. But Carlos, let's get your prediction on record. Going to Minnesota, the Vikings won. In fact, the Lions have of their 8 losses so far this year, 7 of them have been by 8 points or less. The Vikings being the lone exception. That was the one game where they really got handled. I think it was a 12-point outcome in the end, but I think Minnesota really controlled that game. Good team. They can run the ball with Dalvin Cook. They've obviously got a couple good receivers, good defense. So David Blau making his second start. Who are you taking this weekend and why?
Well, you got to take the Vikings. I mean, they've had a good season. What are they, 8-4 or something like that? I mean, they're right there,
playoff bound for sure.
Playoff bound, fighting with the Packers for the NFC North title. They're at home. I mean, it's hard to play there. You got I think the over under is like 43 points. Vikings by 13 and a half, whatever it might be.
Vegas expects a blowout.
Yeah, and I would expect it too. I mean, I think that you know what? Here's the thing: this is the kind of game that the Lions should play loose in this game. It might be closer than you think because this is one of those games. There's the Vikings and the Packers game, right? That nobody's going to give them a chance to win. If they win either one of these games, it's a huge feather in the cap. Look, we didn't quit. Look, we stuck to it. This is a division game. They haven't won in the division yet. All this, stuff, right? So the Vikings are not unbeatable. They're coming off a loss. It's a short week. They're playing at home still, but they played Monday night, right?
Yep.
They lost in Seattle. So I think it'll be closer than people think, but it's still going to be Vikings. I'm going to say 27, say 20.
Okay, all right.
20.
So, I think my prediction was 30-20 Vikings, so we're not all that far off in terms of the score. I think this is look, Dalvin Cook is a little bit hurt. If he doesn't play, maybe that changes the run game. Riley Reeves suffered a concussion the other day. Maybe they don't have their left tackle. So there's a couple things in there that could keep this game close.
Thielen, is he healthy?
I don't know. He didn't play last week. He's really been hurt since the first game here in Ford Field when he got hurt. Yeah, stupid wall. Had to ask Mike Zimmer about that today. But no, I'm interested to see what David Blau can do in a second start and against a good defense, a defense that can be tough to diagnose at times.
Yeah.
But I think all that, you're right. Look, on the road, good opponent. Just the way this season has gone, the Vikings, they need to win to keep pace with the Packers. The Lions, the season is pretty much shot. So I think it's 30-20. Maybe it's not quite as close as that, but I think this is going to be another tough one for the Lions to get. Unfortunately, 6 straight losses, unless you're keeping track of your the draft tracker and chasing Chase Young or whoever you want. Maybe this helps in that regard. But the Lions, I know they want to win. I know they want to get some good vibes going, both upstairs, in the locker room, everywhere. I just don't think it happens this week.
I agree.
All right. Well, that'll do it for us here in Allen Park. Again, long video, long discussion, but there's lots to discuss about the Lions these days. So everyone out there, enjoy your as we get closer to the holiday season here, enjoy your holidays. And Carlos and I will be back here, as always, next week to discuss Lions-Bucks at Ford Field. That'll do it for us. For Carlos Monarrez, I'm Dave Birkett, Freep.com.